peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
You indeed told me that a jobless Kenyan is a desperate Kenyan. You told me also that a hungry Kenyan is a negative Kenyan. You told me that a sick Kenyan is a weak Kenyan. And you also told us that a homeless Kenyan is a Kenyan without hope. You, the Kenyan people, spoke clearly. We want dignity. We want to put enough food on our tables. And we want a lower cost of living. We listened. Since, and on reflection, I have come up with 4 responses to these concerns, and I call them the big 4. Food security, affordable housing, manufacturing, and affordable health care for all.
That is the position on the big 4. Food security, health, universal health care, housing, affordable housing, manufacturing. Many of the people in the rural areas would like to know how food security is very important, to have food enough for eating and surplus for export, to have enough food to feed families. Many people would like to know what universal health care is. We need to start to talk to people, to tell them, to do documentaries. How is the fishing? What type of fishing can be done on a small 1 acre? We need to go out inside in the villages, get our teams that can come up with all documentaries, weekly, daily, so that fishing can be improved. Fishing can become one of the food. When people talk about food in Africa, Miriam, in Siaya, for example, people think of the maize, but fish is also a food item that must be stored, that must have facilities for.
The 4th element is food security and nutrition. Since independence, we as a people have sought to ensure that our citizens enjoy food security and proper nutrition. And while we have made good progress, the challenge, however, remains yet to be fully conquered. It is time to address once and for all the multiple and interlocking factors that leave too many Kenyans at risk of hunger. Our immediate actions start now. We will bring targeted taxation to bear to put arable land to use. We will continue to encourage and facilitate large-scale commercial agriculture to diversify our staples through irrigation and other technologies. We will protect our water towers. Small-scale farmers will receive better extension services and market access, and subsidies will be redesigned to improve food yields and production quality.
We have said 3 items: obstacles, success, and the challenges. One of the obstacles is when the agenda was set out, there was quite a lot of politics that was involved. So time has come for us to remove politics from it and assure the people, the ordinary people, the ordinary mwananchi, citizen of Kenya, that if you have this, you can improve the food security. If you do this, you'll improve the healthcare system. If you do this, if you can plan for a cheaper housing in your local area, a cheaper industry, an industry, a cottage industry. For example, look at what we want people. How many youths can gather themselves into a group in Kayole? 10 youths. If you can be washing people's clothes, ironing them, their shirts, when they come from school, they pay you 300 shillings or 100 shillings, Bob, or 20. And if you are doing that as a small group, this is, you see, a small cottage industry begins there. Then you end up with a huge, dry cleaner. in Kayole, made by youth. But most of the people in our African context, especially Kenya and Uganda and other places, people are focused on the government getting them the jobs. But there is a job. There is the youth fund where you can go and borrow 50,000 shillings and buy dryer, buy this, buy that. You iron people's clothes. There are so many people who are lazy who want, I'm not condemning them, but they go to work very early in the morning. They don't have time to wash this cloth. But you can say, bring your shirts here. You'll have them in the tomorrow morning. You put in a dryer, iron, another youth is ironing. You earn your living. You create employment for yourselves and for the people surrounding you.
So job creation.
I want you in this spirit to also turn to the person sitting or standing next to you. Greet them and say how proud you are to be Kenyan, and tell them that you are their keeper. Because to be Kenyan, at its core, is about loving your neighbor.
Associated to 2022 elections have dominated the political arena in Kenya for years and months now. President Uhuru Kenyatta in the recent past has warned people not to engage in politics, but engage in nation building and development. As much as the president has given these warnings, the people have not heeded to the warnings. The objective of improving the lives of Kenyans is the most important thing that you need to have. Kenyans need to have their lives improved. Kenyans need development instead of campaigns. Kenyans don't eat campaigns. Kenyans need health care, good housing, industries, jobs for younger generation, and above all, infrastructure to be able to transport the goods that they manufacture and the crops that they grow for export. It is therefore very important for the people of Kenya to understand that With development lacking, the country will not prosper. President Uhuru Kenyatta has emphasized again that the only thing that can bring Kenya to a world-standing nation, a developing nation, is prosperity through unity of purpose. If you are not united, you cannot deliver to what other people, other nations went through and got united. Look at Germany, for example. It had a lot of anger after the Second World War. But today, Germany gives us the loans that we share, that we Google. You Google a company in Germany and you get what you want. We also global their money, hammer it, eat it every day. Some of us through corruption, some of us through extended kickbacks. But Germany had more anger than any other country in the world after the Second World War. Today, it's a healed country. The only message that Kenyans can take from here is a redemption strategy. The only thing that can heal this country is redemption, forgiveness, reconciliation, restitution, and reparations. And above all, truth-telling and accountability that will bring about the word redemption, which is healing. So for now, those who want to have a better Kenya tomorrow, begin the journey now. 1 inch by inch. Move together with your president. The nation will be a great nation. Thank you.
Peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
There are a number of countries in Africa that produce oil. Kenya today became one of the member states of oil-producing countries in Africa. It exported its first oil, where President Uhuru Kenyatta flagged off the oil that was got from Turkana in one of the northeastern parts of this country. But is oil a curse to Africa? Is oil a curse to the entire places where oil is found? We see in the Middle East, the wars in Iran, in Saudi Arabia, in Yemen, in United Arab Emirates. It has developed the area in Qatar. We all have many cities, skyscrapers coming up because of the proceeds from the oil. But can Africa emulate that example and bring the same oil proceeds to make sure that it makes lives better for the people, the betterment of the people of Africa and their families and their other activities? I want to see that. But I might not be able to explain why Africa always falls a victim. Are there external forces that make the oil in Africa to become sour? Is it the competition of the oil companies, Total and Shell BP and others, that come to Africa to take the share of the oil? Simply because we have no energy, ability to be able to drill the oil ourselves, refine it ourselves. It is shocking, therefore, to go to Nigeria, for example, a country that produces 30 in the world for oil production has no petrol at petrol station. Is this not a curse? If it's not a curse, what do you call it? Thank you.
Very good morning to you, and thank you so much for watching this morning, the 28th of January 2020, and 27 days to go towards, the unity government being formed there in South Sudan, which is now being merged with other unrelated issues or related issues, or key players are trying to bring in some other excuses and counter excuses and accusations here and there that threatens this deadline that they were given after the extension of 100 days. So that is just a part of some things that we'll be looking at when we look at the African news. But right now, I'd like for us to just go through, the news-making headlines in Kenya. But before we do that, we'll be discussing that together with Dr. David Matsanga via the phone. Doctor, good morning. Good morning.
Hello.
Hi, good morning.
There seem to be. Good morning, Miriam.
Good morning to you. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can see you. I can hear you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right. So,
First of all, thank you very much, viewers of Punchline Africa Television, the only television in Africa that broadcasts throughout Africa, talking about Pan-African issues, talking about what ails Africa, what kills Africa, what destroys Africa. We stand by our motto of Pan-Africanism, and we shall be doing so without fear of any contradiction, and we shall always support the best that comes out of Africa. We shall defend the African country at anywhere on this continent. I am pleased that lots of things are happening in Kenya, and we'd like the people find out a few that are taking place in Kenya.
All right. And Doctor, speaking about Kenya, a lot is happening, and we can tell that through the headlines that you're having in our local newspapers today. And let's just start with the Standard. And what is on the front pages there? It says Ruto Palace coup, and it continues to say, checkmate when 173 members of parliament defy party secretariat to attend a retreat organized by Deputy President's allies and vow to hold a separate BBI rallies. Now, Tuju has disowned that meeting and says resolutions not binding. So apparently the meeting that was happening in Naivasha, about 173 members of parliament that are allied to Deputy President William Ruto has said, you know what, they will not be attending these BBI rallies together as they had come out to promise. And now they'll be holding their own separate BBI rallies to counter those that are being held by President and Raila Odinga's allies. So I don't know, what do you make of this turn of events this morning?
Thank you very much. And I would like to, first of all, make my comments very clear. And my comments, I don't know whether you are picking me clear.
Yes, I can get you.
Yeah. First of all, the comments that the headlines that you see there, we anticipated those headlines. And one of the things that I have always maintained and said, and I will continue to say, that there must be a redemption strategy. Whether this redemption strategy comes in which format, Kenya needs a redemption strategy. And I think I will go back to my ethics and stand by my ethics, because it looks like nobody in this country, Kenya, is trying to see that there is need for redemption strategy. Nobody looks like, nobody is seeing seriously that there is need for healing. Nobody is seeing that the elections every day. Ma'am, just wait.
All right, so nobody sees the need for redemption strategy, but how the way things are today, Doctor, and from that headline, I don't know how can even redemption even possible in this situation?
First of all, Miriam, we need a redemption strategy, and that strategy must come from a point of view that people are willing to redempt, to heal, to end the rifts, and to end the wounds.
All right, we seem to be having a problem there. I don't know, Doctor, can you still hear us? Okay, we seem to be having a bit of a technical hitch there with our connection this morning. We are having a phone conversation with Dr. David Matsanga, who is out of the studio, and I just wanted to get his thoughts about just a few things happening. I don't know, Doctor, are you back? Can you hear us?
Yes, I am back online because of where I am in Mombasa. It looks like there's quite a lot of wind coming up. But I am back on the line. You pick me right?
All right. So you said the redemption strategy is what is necessary for this country. And these 173 members of parliament have gone out and said we're not supporting the calls by President to work together and, campaign for this BBI. Even as some members came out last week and said they'll be part of the people who will be attending these rallies of the BBI rallies in all the places in Kenya. But they've come out and said they don't care for that. And they're saying they'll be organizing their own parallel rallies to counter that, to which Raila Odinga and President Uhuru Kenyatta's allies will be having across the country. So you're saying this situation requires a redemption strategy. So what would you, what kind of redemption strategy would we possibly, put in place for this to, to find a resolution of some sort?
First of all, Kenya needs healing. Kenya needs reconciliation. Kenya needs accountability. Kenya needs restitution. Kenya needs reparation. And I'm saying Kenya needs to fix its elections. Less than that, let's just keep quiet. Because there is nothing you can do without fixing the elections in Kenya, and then you want to do an election. My position is that whoever framed up the building of bridges initiative must go back to the core of what it meant. What was it that it meant to achieve? Was it meant to divide and to paralyze the state? If it was meant to paralyze the state, then let's talk about it. Let's see why it is paralyzing the state. Let's see why the state is paralyzed today. Why two sides and two sharp ends, two sharp divergent views coming from different angles of political players. What is the problem? If that is where, if they don't sort that out, and then the more they go about, another group starts its own rally and goes ahead to do its own politics, we are going to go back to where we ended, because we did a handshake, and then we did a handshake in order to cool these tensions. But it seems that we have opened the tensions, and these tensions could ruin the country, could bring the country to knees, with economically, politically, socially. And you can see already there are too many hardships in terms of business and investments that are coming in. The money is not flowing in the hands of the people. Therefore, whoever is designing this hop, step, and a jump and a retreat policy in the middle of the BBI itself, whoever is doing it is leading us to a very dangerous slopes where we might not be able to control the river when it bursts.
All right, so there's something there you mentioned that is very crucial, and I think some key players have been saying that you're saying if this BBI is looks like it's dividing, it's polarizing the country, then perhaps you should start having a conversation about what's part or why really is it seen with some people as if it's dividing the country. And we've seen that is some claim, especially the opposition allied to the deputy president, or generally the people who do not agree with the BBI, saying this something is dividing the country, and contrary to what the BBI is supposed to do, that is to bring the country together. So what solution then? How should the country go about, or these politicians or the country as a whole, how should we go about handling this BBI that will not end up dividing the country further?
I think the president has to take charge of this country and take charge of the BBI. When the president is at the rally, people will not be able. Both groups must move together. All groups must move together. And it is time, high time, the president took up the mantra together with Raila, Amolo Odinga, and other stakeholders. They stood up and started going around together to make sure that the BBI does not spill into another show that polarizes the situation in Kenya. Because the way the things are going, the sample of the two rallies and the sample of the rally in Mombasa, where people pledged to work together. And then there's another sprinter group that goes to say we shall hold our own parallel line. We are not uniting people at all. Let's be very frank. Let's leave it to God. I have done my best. I have told you the pillars of the redemption strategy are 5. Reconciliation, truth-telling, accountability, restitution, reparations. It leads to one word, healing. If Kenyans don't want to heal, it will be very difficult for them ever and ever to be united as one nation. If they don't want to heal, if there is no healing process, then let's forget even talking about elections of 2022, because it will be a Waterloo, a meltdown that nobody will like, because we have not tackled the main problem as to why Kenya has always had elections and the people die every 5 years. That is my point, and I stand to that. This BBI must address the election, the electoral mechanism. What mechanism do you want to put on Kenya? What mechanism does Kenya want for itself? Less than that, I think the current trend of how BBI is going, say so-called rallies, I think we are going to have a meltdown that creates more difficulties for the ordinary ordinary citizen. That is my plain, balanced analysis.
Okay, so you've mentioned there that President Uhuru Kenyatta should lead from the front, and perhaps should start attending some of these BBI rallies because when he's there, and maybe people will not be making some of these comments we've been seeing being made. But also now we've seen this other team has said, they'll be having their own parallel rallies, so they'll not be attending any more rallies, as they had come out last week to say. And of course, they have planned their first rally. I see here on the Standard newspaper. Is it the first rally is supposed to happen very soon? I can't get the date now, but very, very soon. They've said that they will start their first rally on February 8th. That is when the team allied to the deputy president will be starting their first rally on BBI, and in Naivasha. I think that will be in Nakuru. That will be their first venue. So I don't know, how can the president be? And yesterday, of course, on the Star newspaper, we can see on the front pages, President Kenyatta meets with Deputy Ruto for 5 hours over BBI. Is President Uhuru Kenyatta taking charge now, or has he realized perhaps there needs to be a new strategy on how to go about this BBI?
Any conflict resolution expert like me, I just seek to shut my mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Are you with me?
I'm listening.
Any conflict resolution expert like me, I shut my mouth for now.
All right, but let me just
because Miriam,
yes,
the original basis of building bridges is a redemption strategy. But if people have left the redemption strategy and they are jumping on political strategy, we have a problem. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
This is a healing process, and I want you to take it from me. If it goes the way it is going, by the end of these rallies, Kenya will be polarized into two serious camps that will create even more tension and create very unmanageable situation. And that is why I'm saying I'm seeking to keep quiet about it.
All right. So anyway, according to the Star, President Kenyatta on Monday held the private talks with Deputy William Ruto against the backdrop of perceived infighting in the Jubilee administration. Now, according to sources within the presidency, Uhuru telephoned the DP in the morning and asked him to proceed for a meeting with him at State House in Nairobi. While the final details of the meetings that lasted well over 5 hours was scanty by the last evening, it is understood that the two leaders discussed the BBI report that has kicked off a political storm and expected Jubilee Party elections in March. And of course, the team allied to the Deputy President William Ruto has been calling for party elections in March, and President Uhuru Kenyatta has not been very warm towards that call. So, will this change anything?
I think I am not privy to what they discussed.
Yes, there's no details. Yes.
There are no details, but I agree with your analysis or the analysis of the newspaper that it is a storm. So they have to calm down a storm. The party needs to bridge its bridges. The bridges seem to be going apart. So if you look at my legacy trend this morning, I think I've written a very expansively. I've written the commentary, editorial commentary, which is very, very interesting. So anybody who wants to have a look at it, the legacy trend, can see my thoughts, can read it through my brain, can read it through what I think is going to be the next way forward. And that is exactly what it is, and that is what it means by having a reconciliatory manner in which the two sides must tone down. The two sides must stand not to antagonize each other because they are tearing apart the ruling party. So it is up to them to iron. I hope they did iron their differences, but I can see the belittlement, the insults, the underrating of the presidential name and mismatching the president's character continues in the social media, engineered by people who are hired to do so. So this is going to it is up to the president who has made a decision, and it is accountable to the Kenyans and is accountable to the entire world of which way direction it goes. And it comes at the backdrop of them being invited to go to United States of America. So if they have been invited and they're going to talk about the BBI which is running into chaos, I think that doesn't go well at all.
So are you sensing sabotage?
I am sensing Machiavellian politics.
All right.
Have I summarized it for you?
Yes, but perhaps you could expound for our viewers.
Yeah, Machiavellian politics. Someone has played Machiavellian politics. And I've been telling you all along that please be careful of Nikolai Machiavelli. Be careful if you have read Julius Caesar, Cassius, Brutus, Cassius. The comets are in the sky. And if Julius Caesar doesn't see the comet, and they have been there for 7 weeks, I am not part of the astrologers who should look at the comets. So it is any astrologer in the State House should look at the comets, that there is a Nikolai Machiavelli, a situation that the MPs land in Naivasha. Murkomen leads the story and the land in Naivasha. And then Korea takes over and announces what they want to do, opposing the boss. So it is a very interesting scenario. So when you have read all those books, Nikolai Machiavelli, when Sicily was burning, Nikolai Machiavelli was sent to Rome. Rome was very peaceful. You fight for Sicily first, but here we have put our interest for Rome, for Rome, which is peaceful. We want a 2022, which might not be there when Sicily is gone. So here we are. You can understand the Machiavellian type of politics, the Machiavellian operations that have taken place. And I shudder. I can't say anything more than that, but people will see. It will come out. Miriam, it is not going to be long. It will come out. It is going to come out. It will show its ugly face again. We are polarized. The state is polarized. Whether you don't talk about it or you talk about it, it's polarized.
All right, Doctor, and before I let you go, I'd like for us to look at Agenda 4. And President Uhuru Kenyatta has, of course, a legacy that he wants to leave for Kenyans, and that in terms of agriculture, housing, manufacturing, universal healthcare. These are things that President Uhuru Kenyatta is really trying to make sure that he is able to address. And when he leaves office, perhaps he will be remembered by how much he was able to change Kenyans' lives through this Agenda 4. How much do you think President Uhuru Kenyatta has been able to achieve so far?
There is some achievement, yes. Very significant achievement is beginning to show. The president took heed, and he has replaced the agriculture minister who was betraying him in agriculture and the food security, who doesn't know how much food we have, how much do we require. So that is not a very bad situation at all. That one is a very manageable situation where the president has done a very good job. But when it comes to other aspects, universal health care, yes, they are trying, but they still need a strong hand to make sure that things work very, 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 very perfect. That is okay. It needs very, very strong arm to push the health care and so that people can have universal health care, NHSF, or whatever you call it, is something that people need to put in place so that it's workable, it works for the people of Kenya. I want to take this opportunity to thank the government for having improved on infrastructure. We see roads coming up, we see new construction of roads, new construction of airports being expanded, maintaining the old airports and maintaining the SGR, also pushing it towards Uganda and Rwanda. That is the essence of infrastructure development and infrastructure building systems. That is okay. But the point that I want to make here is, it remains one of the cardinal points, is the question of whether the infrastructure will help the economy, whether the economy will be able to be sustained under the heavy expenditure. We leave it to happen as it is.
All right, Doctor. But before I let you go, I think there's something that I told you. I'll go to African news shortly, but before I do that, let me just read you something here. Now, Eritrea's president, Isaias Afwerki, Somalia's Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo, and Ethiopia's Prime Minister, Mr. Abiy Ahmed Ali, have agreed a joint plan of action for this year after the third edition of a tripartite summit in Asmara. The three leaders met for discussions on Monday in what the Eritrean Information Ministry said were candid and extensive discussions of the situations in their respective countries. Now, the statement by the ministry said the three nations reaffirmed their commitment in the September 2018 deal signed in Asmara with a view to consolidating it and expanding it across the Horn of Africa. So these are some of the things that they agreed on, a joint plan action for 2020, that is consolidating peace, stability and security, promoting economic and social development, bolstering efforts to foster effective regional cooperation. Well, I don't know what, I don't know if I'm reading too much into this meeting between Ethiopia, Somalia, and Eritrea. But what do you make of it in a nutshell?
It's a disaster. It's a disaster. That's the plan for Somalia to bring in the troops from Ethiopia and Eritrea. As you know very well, I've been telling people on this television station that Somalia is looking for some other alternatives. They are looking for alternatives to edge out to Kenya out of Kismayo and to edge out to Uganda out of Somalia. They are looking for that, and they have finally, if they have done so, then they plan to disintegrate the entire region is beginning. And I've told you that there are so many ways of these guys in the support. They do support terrorism, and that is the truth. That they are the ones who know where Al-Shabaab is. So if they have come back to unite with Kenya, with Somalia, then you can see which direction the entire Somali conflict is taking and which shape it will take. Believe me or not, Kenya will come out wounded out of this. That's my position.
All right, Doctor, unless you have something else to add, do you have something else to add and tell our viewers?
I just want to tell the viewers that it is all right for us, especially Kenyans, to unite, the people to unite under a unit of purpose. And let's hope this unit of purpose will not be affected. Let's hope that this unit of purpose will not bring a divided, polarized Kenya. If the BBI message goes the way it is now, the two sides are emerging very, very brutal. They are brutally, opposing each other. So let the president take charge and send a message, a clear message to them that he's not going to tolerate such things. Thank you.
Okay, Doctor, it was a pleasure talking to you this morning. Enjoy the rest of the day. Bye for now.
Thanks.
All right, so there we were having the phone conversation or interview, if you like it, with Dr. David Matanga, who's is at a different place this morning and has been for the last few days. But right now, I would just like us to, perhaps look at some also other news making headlines across the Kenya for the next maybe 3 or 4 minutes, and then we shall jump right into, the news making headlines across Africa. We have so much to talk about this morning. So on this front pages of the Star newspaper, Babu Owino out on 10 million shillings bail, barred from taking alcohol and narcotics. And I was seeing somebody on Facebook yesterday and also social media platforms, a lot of Kenyans were saying, who is going to ensure that a member of parliament, Mr. Babu Owino, does not take any alcohol and does not take any narcotics? Remember, there's a video that has been doing rounds in social media about him shooting a DJ at a club a few days ago, and he's been in police custody since then. I think he spent a couple of nights, nearly a week or so, in the police custody. So yesterday he was allowed to leave, and he was given a 10 million Kenya shillings bail, and was asked not to drink alcohol and narcotics. But I don't know who will ensure that this is enforced, because we don't have such here in the country. So also on the front pages of the Star newspaper, Sarah gets nothing in Cohen will. Now Tob Cohen left all his wealth, assets and cash to his sister and her children. Gabriel Van Straten got the majority share of the wealth, including money in his offshore account in Amsterdam and 2 accounts in Kenya, along with 50% share of 450 million shillings palatial matrimonial home in Kitisuru. Now he left his nephew Seth Straten and niece Sharon Van Strahoven a 25% share each of the house, which is currently being sought by widow Sarah Wairimo. His brother Bernard did not get anything, but was given the mandate to be the executor and the trustee of the will alongside their sister. So this is a case that I'm not sure if Sarah will take this lying down. But remember, Tob Cohen was killed last year. And right now, the case was continuing in court, and there it is. That is what the will says. So Sarah might not be very happy about that will they are left by Tob Cohen. And something else here also on the Star newspaper, gun stolen at DP's residence after officer brings in sex worker. I will not even get into the details of that, but if you want, you can go to page 2 of the Star newspaper. And also, a needy boy walks 3 days to enroll at Cheboyet Boys. Remember, Form 1 students in Kenya, those who sat for their Kenya Certificate of Primary Education last year, are joining the high school this year. And so there are a lot of needy children who were, admitted to good national schools and have not been able to, to report. But others which have been highlighted in the media, I've seen Kenyans come in handy and helping, and that is a very, very good thing. So this boy had to walk 3 days to access the school. I'm just wondering, where's the council or the county member of assembly in that area that perhaps could even help with the bus fare or something? I don't know, but there you go, and all the best to that young man there. And on the front pages of course, the Daily Nation, as the world continues to mourn Kobe Bryant and other people who, of course, died in that ill-fated plane there on Sunday. Now, Bryant's death sends shockwaves beyond NBA, and world honors basketball legend and cultural icon killed in a plane crash. And, Daily Nation has written a very extensive story about Kobe Bryant's life and how, lives and times of Kobe Bryant. So if you want to know that, you can go to page 2, page 44 and page 45. They have extensive news and pictorial to, tell the same. And so when patients lose trust in hospitals, this is the story. The story is published by The Nation in past 2 days about healthcare at a private hospital have elicited strong reactions, not just from medics, but more so Kenyans who tell of harrowing experiences in some hospitals. The bond of trust between doctors and patients is quickly getting eroded in the race by some private hospitals to make money. So apparently, hospitals have a certain, like they have I can't remember the right name for it, but especially the private hospitals and clinics across the country, they have been fleecing Kenyans a lot. So you go there. I remember I took a patient there a couple of days ago, and it was just malaria apparently. But the doctor even asked if they could do a kidney test, and I'm like, come on, you've already found it's malaria. Can you just treat it? But you see, when the doctor suggests a kidney and liver and these other things, are like, okay, perhaps they know what they're talking about. But they found nothing because they already found what was wrong with that patient. But you see, that is how they get to fleece patients. So I'm told, the Daily Nation has been carrying out these stories, and Kenyans have now have been sharing their harrowing experiences and bloated bills that they receive in some of these private hospitals, both at the top end and even just the normal ones in the states. Kenyans have been suffering from the hands of these business people in the health center And of course, still on the Standard front page is Kobe daughter and basketball, a passion that lived on to death. Of course, like her father, the 13-year-old was, talented basketball player. With his help as her personal coach, Gianna hoped to become a professional basketball player. So anyway, all right. And ODM pushes for new power structure. Raila party declares support for regional governments, and a powerful prime minister saying they are the most popular proposals from the ongoing regional BBI meetings. Okay, so now we are done. We are done with that, done and dusted. And good morning to you, Innocent Chibu. And you're saying good morning. All right, and Happy New Year. Is it? What date is it, Mr. Chibu? But happy New Year. Nice to see you this morning. And the same Biafrans in diaspora sends greetings to Punchline Africa. And may you bring to our notice that you're aware that the leader of IPOB, Nnamdi Kanu, will be laid to rest, yes, on 14th. So you've not been here for a while, I can see that, because I've told our viewers that, Nnamdi Kanu's parents are supposed to be interred on the 14th of February. And of course, he had expressed that he perhaps would have wanted to come and bury his parents. And, the government of Nigeria has said, no, we're just waiting for him. Should he land, at the airport, then we shall get him, and he will go, face the charges that were preferred against him before he ran away from Nigeria in 2017. But thank you so much, and the rest of you who are watching. So right now, let's just look at what else is making headlines across Africa. Is it morning? Yes, this morning. About 12 minutes to midday. And we start with Ethiopia, where leading rights group Amnesty International now says that at least 75 supporters of the Oromo Liberation Front have been arrested in Ethiopia as crackdown on dissenting political views intensifies ahead of a general election. And they're saying arrests took place during the weekend across Oromia region, including the towns of Finchawa and Shambu. Amnesty added among those detained was prominent activist Charles Takele. Police broke into her parents' home in Shambu at 5 a.m. local time on Sunday and arrested her, the rights group said. Now, the National Electoral Board of Ethiopia has proposed 16th of August as the date for elections, and the first to be held since Prime Minister Ahmed took power last April. And the latest on the Sahel insecurity, and now Czech Republic Defense Ministry plans to deploy troops to the African continent, and was on Monday approved by the government. Now, the service members will join Operation Barkhane, and that is France's largest overseas military mission. Now, it has been working to root out Islamic militants roaming the Sahel region, and the government said Mali, Niger, and Chad approved the Czech deployment. The Czechs will help local troops fight Islamic State. Now, let me just take a very short break. I feel like I'm about to choke, and get me some water, and then I will come back in a very short while. So please don't go away. I shall be back.
Viewers, those listening to this tape or this video, I want to bring to your attention that the politics of proxy wars in Africa is becoming real, and it has become a reality. I want to bring to the attention of the African states that time and time again we have fallen victims of proxy wars. We fight wars that are not ours. We fall in conflicts that are not supposed to be, don't help Africa, and they don't help our countries at all. The proxy war that is in East and Central and the Horn of Africa has been ignited, supported, equipped by France. It has been very real that the French government, quietly through its company called Total Oil, has been searching for resources around the triangle of East and Central Africa and the Great Lakes region and the Horn of Africa. The LAPSET was one of them, which could have been a landmark project for the people of France. They withdrew from it. The Tanga to Mwanza, they made it, they withdrew from it. The search for oil and resources through Total Oil has brought us the dangers of a proxy war in the region. It is therefore very prudent for people of the region to understand the dynamics that we are going through. For example, in Rwanda and the Burundi conflict, there is a proxy war. We are fighting a proxy country has brought us to a war between the two countries, between Uganda and Rwanda and Burundi. There is a proxy war in Congo who is sponsoring a resurgence of rebels that are fighting President Tshisekedi because he was not supported by countries that we know very well. This type of strategy has happened in North Africa, where Libya has been reduced to rebels, where each faction, even the government supported by United Nations, is being bombarded by a rebel called Khalifa Haftar, who is funded by countries that we know. The question of Somalia and the Kenyan maritime presents a challenge, a test case for Africa and East Africa to stand firm and denounce the actions of countries that bring proxy wars and proxy politics in our region. It is therefore my humble submission that for this conflict, for this to end, we must do enough publicity, advocacy around the area to tell and explain to the international community why this problem is going to create an imbalance in the peace in the region, and the regional peace will be affected. It is therefore my humble submission that as a Ugandan whose troops, brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers of other many millions Ugandans who are in Somalia, condemn any action by the Somali government to try to resolve issues that should have been resolved amicably as Africans within the African confines. I submit, therefore, that some of us will go a mile further to do now, from now onwards, to expose, to show the challenges of these countries that make us fight a proxy war in Africa. Thank you very much for listening. God bless you.
Welcome back, and this is Good Morning Africa show coming to you all the way from Kenya's capital here in Nairobi. And of course, we're almost an hour into the show, and earlier on we were having a conversation with Dr. David Matanga, and we looked at the situation and the political dynamics in Kenya today, in regards to the BBI and the storm that has become this BBI, and also that, some leaders are saying this BBI, as much as it is about uniting Kenyans, also it has worked to further, divide the country. So we had that conversation just a while ago, in case you're joining us. But right now, of course, I took a break. I was having some problems with my throat. So sorry if it doesn't sound very, very nice. But let's just continue with the African news. And now the latest from Libya. The head of Libya's National Oil Corporation has urged the United States, France, and Britain to do more to stop outside powers interfering in Libya. Mustafa Senala refused to name the regional powers he was referring to, but the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and Russia are supporting the forces of General Khalifa Haftar, and while Qatar, Turkey have backed the UN-endorsed government of national unity in the West. Now, Mr. Sanala told the BBC that the situation in his country was becoming very dangerous and there were a risk Libya could become like New Syria, an oil blockade imposed 10 days ago by forces loyal to General Khalifa Haftar has limited production to just 72,000 barrels of oil a day. And then we move to Nigeria, where Nigeria's business capital Lagos plans to ban motorcycles and tricycles, the city's most common forms of transport, from its major roads. The Lagos state government said the ban is a result of deaths and disorderliness caused by motorcycles, locally referred to as Okadas, and tricycles known as Kekes. It will take place on 1st of February and will be enforced on all major highways and bridges, and it will be extended to other areas after an impact assessment is done. And we move to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where the United Nations top human rights official has called on the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo to take action to curb human rights violations by the country's army. On the final day of her visit to the DRC, Michelle Bachelet told the United Nations radio that figures from her organization's peacekeeping mission showed that the military and what she called agents of state were behind more than half of the violations. She added that there has been 19 extra judicial executions in November alone. However, Ms. Bachelet said the total number of human rights abuses by the state and rebel forces over the past year was slightly down. And we go to Egypt, where an Egyptian court has sentenced 37 people to jail for joining or supporting the Islamic State, a group in the Sinai Peninsula. The area has seen a militant insurgency which has held to the deaths of hundreds of security personnel. The jailed men were accused of planning attacks and spreading Islamic State ideology. 8 of the defendants were handed life sentences. Mass sentencing under President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has drawn criticism from human rights groups who have called for a fairer trial. And we cross over to Cameroon, where candidates for Cameroon's legislative and municipal elections officially began campaigning over the weekend for a vote scheduled to take place on 9th of February. Now, the exercise has been boycotted by some opposition parties, but President Paul Biya's party is working tirelessly to secure a majority in the 180-seat National Assembly. The election is seen as a key test for Paul Biya, who won re-election controversially in 2019. Despite the official start of the campaign, the final list of candidates for the legislative and municipal elections has not yet been published. Originally planned to happen in 2018, the exercise was postponed twice for lack of funds over Ambazonia violence in the country's north and southwest regions. And we go to Angola, where now Angolan billionaire Isabel dos Santos said on Monday that she was launching legal action against a consortium of journalists and its media partners over the publication of thousands of documents about her business empire. Dos Santos, whose father, Jose Eduardo dos Santos, was Angola's president for 38 years and until 2017, said the documents released last week by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists and its media partners were part of a concerted and intense campaign against her. We move to Guinea, where Guinea's economy is crumbling after months of mass rallies sparked by fears of a third term for President Alpha Conde, with analysts not even worried about the mighty mining sector. Now, businesses have shut and protesters have rained rocks on police stations, looted property, blocked major roads, and reportedly stopped trains in their tracks, severely hampering the easy flow of goods across the country. And we go to Gambia, where the Gambian government on Sunday launched a crackdown on weeks-old movement demanding the departure of President Adama Barrow following violent demonstrations in which medical officials say 3 protesters were killed. Now, tensions have been building in the Gambia, a tiny West African country surrounded by Senegal, over Barrow's decision to stay in office for 5 years after initially pledging to step down after 3 years. I apologize for that. And we move to Zimbabwe, where in Zimbabwe now, the second city, Bulawayo, there's not been water for the last couple of days, and of course there's risky drinking untreated water from a borehole used to by so many people. That is what the Zimbabweans are going through there right now. And also a story about Zimbabwe, also sanctioned by the West and spurred by China. Zimbabwe has turned to the United Arab Emirates in its latest bid to find a savior that can arrest the collapse of its economy. Now, Zimbabwe's government has approached the United Arab Emirates in hopes of selling a stake in its national oil company, according to three company government officials familiar with the plan. It also wants company in the UAE to buy more of its gold. They said President Emerson Mnangagwa has said UAE investors will build a solar plant in Zimbabwe, and UAE President Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan a year ago issued a decree to open an embassy in Zimbabwe. Dubai also contributed to relief efforts when Zimbabwe was hit by a cyclone last year. And we go to South Sudan, and the main opposition group SPLM-IO now says its leader will return to Juba next week for a final attempt to breaking the deadlock over the number of states. Dr. Riek Machar left Juba for Khartoum on Sunday after spending 2 weeks of fruitless negotiations with President Salva Kiir in Juba. The two principals were expected to agree on whether to maintain, increase, or reduce the current number of states. The determination of the number and boundaries of the states is among the tasks expected to be completed within the pre-transitional period. They were also to confirm their interest to form a government of national unity, considering the reported slow progress in the training and unification of the forces. And still in South Sudan, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation has called for an independent investigation into last week's attack in Abyei, where over 30 people were killed. An attack on Wednesday by Miseria armed men on Kolum village north of Abyei town initially left 29 people, including children, dead. The number later increased to 32. Now, the incident was condemned by both government of South Sudan and the Sudan. Survivors of the attack and the Abyei community in Juba accused the United Nations force in the area of failing to protect them. And we look at some news from Biafra, and now Vice President Yemi Osianbanjo on Monday lamented the inability of Nigeria to leverage on the engineering and technological ingenuity that emanated from the defunct Republic of Biafra during the Civil War. He expressed the regret at a town hall meeting at the National Museum, Mwahia, organized by Ken Namani Center for Leadership and Development to mark 50th anniversary of the end of the Nigerian Civil War. The Vice President noted that there was an attempt to harness the Biafra technology by establishing the Project Development Agency (PRODA), and in a good to replicate and improve on the Biafra technological feats exhibited during the war. However, he said that the objective was not achieved, but did not explain the reasons why PRODA was allowed to collapse. So in other words, and that is the latest from Africa this afternoon. Very good afternoon to you, and good morning, good evening, depending on where you're watching us across the world. Abdiaziz Ahmed, you're saying BBI is an initiative to block William Ruto to becoming a president in 2022. Even we in Somalia are aware of that. Jamal lady, let us not be blind. Let us not blind ours. Oh, okay. How are you? How are you this afternoon or good morning, Abdiaziz Ahmed? You're saying let us not blind ourselves. And Brighto Eka, you're saying, good morning, Miriam. I'm watching from Ambazonia, and the government military still burning our villages and rendering our people homeless because of elections. So is BN team, and they feel we need elections. And I think Chol Makori is saying, AU stand up and join hands with international communities. And who else here? Innocent Chibu, Chol Makor, hi, John Clark. You're saying the president and his deputy William Ruto togetherness is intact in its own with the petty leaders misleading their ears. All right, so yesterday, of course, President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy had a lengthy talk at a state house here in Nairobi. Of course, the details of that meeting have not been made public, but there are some suspicion that, of course, they talked about BBI, which I think they had to, and also DP side, Mr. William Ruto's side, have been wanting the party to have a general meeting or even elections, but the other side that is allied to President Uhuru Kenyatta have been very reluctant in doing so. And of course, the leadership there, of Jubilee. So it is said that also that was part of the things that they discussed. But of course, the details of the meetings have not been made public. But they met yesterday for 5 hours plus, and so perhaps they'll share with Kenyans when they feel they're ready, or perhaps they're just looking at the intrigues and what has been happening in Jubilee parties, where that unity has been threatened and the party is split in the middle. That is the truth, Abdulaziz, right? Yes, Abdulaziz, yes, that is the truth. And so perhaps they're just trying to find ways of working together. At the end of the day, they're still in the ruling party. At the end of the day, they're still in government. So they have to find a way of working together and making sure that they're able to deliver on the promises that they promised Kenyans during the last electioneering period. Because, yes, even as we sit here and look at 2022, that is far from far. And Kenyans are like, okay, we still have another 2+ years. Can you do something for us today? Can you change the economy for us today? Can you make sure the farmers, get the fertilizers with these rains and this weather that has become very unpredictable? It is in January here, usually in Nairobi at this time of the year. You can't even walk around with a coat. And today I had to put word in the morning because it's very cold and it's raining. So the weather patterns have changed and we don't even know what to do. So farmers don't know whether should they go start planting or start preparing the lands, or just, it's confusing. And they're waiting. Will the government give us the subsidized fertilizers and other inputs that usually the government should be helping the farmers with, especially those who do large-scale farming and, that feed the rest of us. And we've seen a lot of corruption in that sector, agriculture. We've seen a lot of corruption in other sectors across the country. So Kenyans want President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy, together with his ministers and his government, to solve some of these problems first before they really get into the politics of it. But unfortunately, you'll think that we're going to our elections maybe in just the next few months. The country's on a campaign, is charged, and the politics in this country is charged right now, and BBI is really is fueling this fire. So yes, you're right, Abdiaziz, but perhaps maybe they put the politics aside. I'm hoping that meeting President had with his deputy yesterday, those are some of the things they're looking at. How can they serve Kenyans, regardless of BBI affiliation, yes or no? I mean, that is not the main thing right now. Kenyans need the pressing matters now that Kenyans want address. I'm hoping that those are some of the things that President and his deputy actually looked at in the meeting yesterday. But anyway, we'll see in the next few days if they will be able to share with us what the meeting was all about. So now let's look at what's also making headlines across Africa. And I just read through some of the stories from different countries here in this continent. And let's see. The latest from Libya, and the head of Libya's National Oil Corporation has urged the United States, France and Britain to do more to stop outside powers interfering in Libya. And Mustafa Sanala, who is the head of Libya's National Oil Corporation, has come out and said, their regional powers are interfering. I don't know why he's saying regional powers. I don't know why people can't name these countries outright, because they are known to the world. So he's coming out and he's urging the United States, he's urging France, he's urging Britain to do more to stop outside powers from interfering in Libya. And of course, the outside forces, different countries who have interest in Libya, have really helped in fueling this war. And now he's worried that if something is not done in Libya, then Libya will become the new Syria. And I've always wondered, is there a part of Libya that is untouched by the war? Maybe few, but the majority of the cities and towns in Libya have been marred with this civil war. With the Khalifa Haftar side and the government side, and all of these other groups and these armed civilians who are nearly, are armed there in Libya. So it's a very dire situation there in Libya. So I don't know why they're saying if things run out of control, it might become the new Syria. Does it not resemble Syria already? Because as far as I'm concerned, that Syria where the president is, Assad is, it's very peaceful. I was seeing an advertisement they were making. Forget Aleppo, forget those areas that have been ravaged by that war. But there's also other part of Syria that the president is, and that seems to be doing very well. And there's a time they were even running an advertisement saying, come visit Syria. Can you imagine in the middle of all that death toll and people dying in that other side? I can never forget the image of that boy. I think he was around 3 or 4 years old, and he was sitting behind an ambulance. He had been picked from a rubble that had a building that had collapsed after a grenade, or I don't know, is it a bomb, had been thrown in that. And this boy was the face of what is happening there. That was from Aleppo. It's one of the places in Syria that has been devastated by the current warring that is happening in that country. But what is the difference between Syria and Libya today? Is there a place what is the difference? Is there a functioning government? Is there functioning anything? Can you take a plane today and fly into Libya for anything? I don't think so. So if it's not worse, then they are at par. And so if, things have already gotten out of hand, I don't know why they keep saying that if something is not done, then things will get out of hand. Things have already gotten out of hand. So that is a reality. So now that things have already gotten out of hand, so what then should these stakeholders do? What then should these key players do in terms of restoring peace and stability in Libya? But when you see the countries that, of course, have been named and, to be interfering with this current situation in Libya, they only serve their own purposes, they're only advancing their own agendas and their own foreign policies. And they get to benefit in the chaos that are in Libya right now. And when you see, a country like France or Egypt, and they're supporting Khalifa Haftar, they're not supporting him because what? Because maybe this person, of course, will take care of their interests in that country. Because we've seen, a country like Italy. Libya happened to be one of the countries that, supplies it with the majority of the oil there in Italy, as well as France also. They get so much of it from Libya, so they are affected. Their economies are affected. So now, when they come into Libya, they're just trying to advance their own interests, really, and it's not for the bigger interest of the people of Libya. And of course, Egypt President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's excuse for being, part of this war in Egypt, in Libya, he's saying that. The reason why he's supporting Haftar, he has not come out directly and said, I'm supporting this person, but, there is proof that he's supporting Khalifa Haftar. And last year, I think Khalifa Haftar captured one of the guys who had ran away from Egypt, and he was being sought for by the government, and Khalifa Haftar handed over this person to the government of Egypt. So he wouldn't have done that if they were not that close and they did not have a working relationship. And so So Egypt, President of Egypt has been saying the reason why it's important to support Khalifa Haftar is because he's helping to fight against the Muslim Brotherhood, something that is giving him a lot of headache, even in his own country, in Egypt, a Muslim Brotherhood. And he's been really cracking down on this group mercilessly. As you've seen here yesterday, an Egyptian court sentenced about 17 people in jail for supporting the Islamic State that is, called affiliated to the Muslim Brotherhood. So that is his excuse, and that is the agenda, and that is why he feels it's important for Egypt to support, Haftar, who he says is fighting against these militias that have mushroomed and are all over in Libya. But still, which is the way forward? Libya, how can they just sit down and find a solution? All these countries, forget the Syria, the Libyans inside the country, but all these other countries are interfering in this war. Can they just have one consortium? Because over 1 week ago, perhaps a week and a half now, there was a meeting in Berlin that was chaired by German's Chancellor Angela Merkel, and they were looking at Libya. And I think one of the resolutions that was made from that meeting was that, there should be a stop of, there should be an arms embargo. There has been an arms embargo. The UN put that. But still, arms and more sophisticated arms have been finding their way into Libya. So they're saying this should be enforced. And then a few days later, more arms are coming into Libya. So who is bringing these arms into Libya? Who is this that is, it's so brazen? Who goes against the United Nations, Security Council's even decision? Who is this that even after the meeting that was chaired and all the parties agreed in Berlin, in Germany, are still going ahead and making supplying the different factions with the weapons there in Libya. So this has to be the same people who sit in the United Nations Security Council, because you cannot do that. If it was another country that was violating that arms embargo, right now it should have been sanctions upon sanctions, and you have seen the United States come out and sanction that country. You'd have seen EU step out and sanction that country. The double standards that exist among us. We know, some of these players, especially the international community, according to them, not all animals are equal. So they are, because it's one of them that is violating this, something that is very crucial in finding peace and stability in Libya. But because it's someplace in Africa, so what? And it's one of them who is violating this, so they really are not care. But if it was another country that is different from these key players here, if it was another country that was not UAE, if it was another country that was not Saudi Arabia, but because remember, these are the major funders of the United Nations, so sometimes they get away. Look at how Saudi Arabia is getting away with the death it's causing in Yemen. Look at that. If you go and just read and see and just watch what is happening in Yemen and the chaos, that Saudi Arabia has caused in that country, you'll be shocked. But it cannot be held to account because Saudi Arabia and these other Arabic countries and some other countries across the world are untouchable because of how much they're funding the United Nations. So it's very interesting there, and what comes at play, and you can tell humanity has been sacrificed, which is very bad. So this matter in Libya, I don't know if we shall ever see the end of the death toll. I don't know if we shall ever come here and see and just have different kind of news there from Libya. This war has been going since the toppling of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. NATO was very instrumental in that, and right now it's hands off. They're not even they're not even trying to mediate for peace. They're not even trying to bring these actors together. They're not even actively trying to restore Libya, because they're the ones who destroyed this country. NATO, they led this, and we've seen how that has turned out. So, of course, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and Russia are supporting the forces of General Khalifa Haftar, Russia. And Qatar, Turkey have backed the UN-endorsed government of national unity in the West. And remember, Turkey just came in a few weeks ago, and of course the parliament voted and said, yeah, you can go to Libya and try to help. So after Turkey came and it became a serious threat to the other side, that is when that meeting in Berlin happened. But there seems to be no end to this suffering to the people of Libya. There seems to be no end to this unnecessary bloodshed that is happening. And a country that was once flourishing, was once one of the countries that was doing relatively well in the continent, has now been reduced to shambles. And whoever who is saying that if things get out of hand, the country might now resemble Syria, I think the country is just in the same league as Syria right now. Is there anything you can salvage from Libya? Is there anything that you can look at and say, you know what, perhaps there is some glimpse of hope? The country has been reduced to rebels. The country has been reduced to nothing. And so it's so sad. It's very sad. And to see that people see it and discuss, and they're just like they're in a casino somewhere. They just like it doesn't matter. And at the end of the day, it's the lives of people that are at stake here. And if we could go and check the people who have died in Libya since this war started, it's thousands and thousands of innocent lives that have been lost there in Libya. So I don't know what else to say. I don't know. Perhaps a solution will be reached soon. But we know the people who purport to be working to get solutions for Libya are the same players who are actually working so hard to continue fueling that war in Libya. So double speaks, double standards, like it's just a circus. It will never end. But I live for a day where I'll come here and we shall have some very good news coming from Libya. It appears to be fine to the future, but I hope that day shall arrive. So now there's another problem there that could be crippling in Nigeria. And now Nigeria's business capital, Lagos, plans to ban motorcycles and tricycles. Now the city's most common forms of transport. And even in this country, I don't know. When I was reading this news, I had mixed feelings about it, because even us here, and in Nigeria they're called as Okadas, and those tricycles are called kekes, I think. There've been a menace here of the motorcycles, and there are some estates now, especially the high-end places, where even thugs now are using motorcycles to steal and to rob people and to hold people at gunpoints and all of that. And just a few days ago, the police was able to track a gang of thugs who operate through motorcycles. But that is not to say it has also brought up a lot of business opportunities for young people, because sometimes you're sitting in this traffic, and the traffic in this city, the same as Lagos, can be crazy. So sometimes you just alight from the public vehicle service or something, or taxi or whatever, because you're in a rush going somewhere, and you just hop into a motorcycle and you're able to get there on time. So Nigerians, of course, have not been very happy with this move. And of course, the Lagos state government said the ban is a result of deaths, disorderliness caused by motorcycles. You know what? When you go to Kenyatta National Hospital, which is the biggest referral hospital we have here in Kenya, and it is in Nairobi, there is, now after the flooding of motorcycles in this city, maybe about 10 years ago, thereabout, because they keep increasing, they had to set up a ward for emergency, just a place for emergency for the people who come in after suffering accidents caused by motorcycles, and it is fatal. So I get where the Lagos state government is coming from with this ban, and they are quite disorderly, even in the Kenyan streets here. They will be, if you're not careful, you think the road is clear, you've turned left and right and left, and then you're going to cross because you've seen the cars are at bay. Before you know it, a motorcycle just comes and soups you all the time in town here. At least someone is knocked down or bruised, or just something is happening that involves the disorderliness of motorcycles. But this is not to say that all of them are like that, but majority, they are quite hazardous. to be honest. But I don't know. They've helped a lot of people here in Africa, in Kenya, in Uganda. I also see they're very common, and in Nigeria, okadas are very, very common. So I don't know how the government of Nigeria plans to get rid of these okadas, the motorcycles that offer public transportation there. And it says that the effect will actually take place on the 1st of February, and it will be enforced on all major highways and bridges, and it will be extended to other areas after an impact assessment is done. All right. So if you're coming from Nigeria and, you want to visit Lagos, the state security there, the Lagos state government has said they want to ban the Okadas, the motorcycles, and the tricycles, which you guys call KKs. They're saying these have to go because they cause a lot of deaths, and also they're very disorderly. And it's time I don't know if that is the solution. And also, I don't know. Do they bring in more traffic? Do they increase the traffic on those roads there in Lagos? I'm not sure. But I was just watching the reaction of a lot of Nigerians who benefit from this service, and they're saying, "Come on now, there are better issues that the government of Nigeria or the state of Lagos can actually look at right now, but not getting the Okadas out of the roads, because these things are lifesavers." If you're, I think another musician, he must be a musician. I was just reading his tweet, and he said, "Sometimes when I'm getting late for even a concert, sitting on this traffic," which I hate people who use traffic as an excuse to be late. Because if you've lived in that place for long enough, then you understand that traffic is an issue. So can you leave whatever you're leaving from earlier and make sure you arrive on time? I hate people who, arrive to an appointment or an interview or a meeting or whatever late, and they want to sit there and talk about traffic. Like, come on now, you should have started early. But this person was saying, I think he was saying it in just on a lighter note, and he was saying that sometimes he opts to jump out of taxis or a vehicle during the heavy traffic there in Lagos, and hops into a motorcycles, and is able to make it to his concert on time. So what he's saying now if this new rule that has been, should it start being enforced in February 1st, because that is what the Lagos state has said, then now there will be cancellation of all his concerts. What he's saying, he'll be late all the time. Come on, start early, all right, and don't be late to your own concert. That's not nice. But he was just making light of the situation. So I don't know if you live in Nigeria and you've been benefiting, and in Lagos specifically, and you've been benefiting from this service. I don't know what you feel about it. This afternoon or morning rather. I know there it's still morning. All right. So now let's look at what is happening also now in Cameroon. Specifically Ambazonia, we know that elections are coming up, and Ambazonians have come out and they've been very, very specific about their demands. And one of the demands they're saying is they're not interested in being part of the elections that are scheduled to take place on the 9th of February next month. And these elections to elect legislative representatives and also municipal representatives there. And, and it's going to happen on the 9th of February, but Ambazonians have come out and said, for us in Ambazonia, for us in the Anglophone region, for us in Northwest and Southeast regions, what we are going to do is that this day we are going to sit in the house, and since the elections are starting on the 7th of February, from this on the 9th of February, that is when the elections are happening. It is one day. So us, what you're going to do is we shall sit in our houses starting the 7th, 2 days prior, and then we shall continue sitting until 12th. Is it? Yeah, so Amazonians have announced they shall have a wonderful holiday during this time, where they do not expect anybody in the Anglophone region to go out and vote. In other words, they're not interested in this vote that will be taking place. But you see, this is an exercise that is very, very important to President Paul Biya. I remember after his re-election 2018, that was very controversial. He's trying to, make sure that he gets as many people as possible in the National Assembly. And of course, Cameroon's National Assembly has a total of 180 members of parliament. So he wants to make sure that his party and his government has more members of parliament allied to him. So this is very, very important. And that's why Ambazonians, Mr. Paul Biya sent a contingent of elite army, there in Ambazonia. So they're there. I think they've been changing them every now so often. They were since earlier this month, a contingent of army has been and security forces have been deployed in the Ambazonia regions to try to take care of the security situations or the anticipated insecurity that might happen during the election period there. So I know Ambazonians have been saying you're not interested in voting, but Paul Biya has said you have to vote because it's very important for him. So the election is seen as a key test for Paul Biya, who won the re-election, of course, controversially in 2018. Despite the official start of the campaign, the final list of candidates for the legislative and municipal election has not yet been published. What do you mean? The election is supposed to happen in a couple of days. I mean, what is the date today? 28th, I believe. The election is supposed to be happening on the 9th, and the list of candidates have not been published. What? That is worrying there. And remember, these elections were supposed to be happening in 2018, but they did not happen because Cameroon did not have money to take care of the election in that country. Oh my goodness. How bad are things in, just forget even Amazonia, but how bad are things in the larger Cameroon? So if you have a government that it's on the record of misuse of public funds, that is on the record of other things, abusing, corruption, and other things that, is it last year we were watching a video of a former minister in Paul Biya's government who police were after him, and he had a huge money stuck, I think, in his garage or some room, in his house someplace, and he was burning this money because it was stuck up to near the roof. He was working for Paul Biya, and it was funny, but not really funny, especially when there are people who really, really need this money. So he used to steal new notes, clean, and then it was stuck somewhere in his room. So he was burning when he learned that the police were coming after him. He was burning this money, and they found him burning this money. And then you hear a country cannot have its election because this election was has been postponed twice for lack of funds and of course the situation in Ambazonia. So I don't know. This is something that is quite interesting, but there you go. So elections are slated to happen on the 9th of February for the members of parliament, that is the legislative, and also the municipal elections, the local leaders. Here we call them the MCAs. So, and also, I think I was reading some other news somewhere that there's a leader or a fighter allied to Ambazonia who the government of Paul Biya have been looking for, and I think they managed to get him over the weekend and they killed him. He's called, is it Chacha or something? Please let me know if I get the name right. But the government of Paul Biya is said to have killed him, the military, there over the weekend. That is one of the leaders or fighters allied to Ambazonia. And of course, yesterday we go to Angola now, where Angolan billionaire Isabel dos Santos yesterday said that she's launching a legal action against a consortium of journalists and its media partners over the publication of thousands of documents about her business empire. So dos Santos, she's not letting go. I don't know if she'll be able to fight the government of Angola. And I've not heard her father come out and talk. Perhaps he knows more to it. He's been very quiet. Former President Jose Eduardo dos Santos, who was the president of Angola for 38 good years, and his daughter Isabel dos Santos is now facing serious corruption and theft and money laundering in Angola, and the government of Angola right now And President Lorenzo has, ordered that some of her assets be frozen. She does not really reside in Angola. She lives in the UK and also another country there in Europe. So, she has serious business acumen in her own country. And so there is a consortium of journalists who are able to help expose some of the corruption tied to her. And there's another bank that she banks with in Europe, I think in Spain. And when some documents were linked on how she's been working with the bank management and how she's been banking her wealth there, I think the manager, or is it the CEO or something like that, I think resigned. And then a couple of hours or days, he was found dead. So it's like a mafia or something. Money is very dangerous. People want it, but I think sometimes it attracts a lot of problems. You have too much of it, and you can't even sleep at night. And that is the situation the Africa leading wealthiest woman finds herself today. But I think it depends also how you earn it. If you earn it through hard work and sweat, then you can enjoy it in peace. But if you earn it in other ways, then it becomes a problem. Francis Jengo, you're saying President Barack Obama administration destroyed Libya with the help of the NATO alliance. Exactly. And I think that is something that he regrets very much. He did. And Dominique Nwandu, you're saying the leaders in Africa know what to do, but deceiving the masses. Only what they know is their selfish interest, of course. And so let's see how this case by Isabel Dos Santos will do. She's saying she's going to sue the Angolan government, and also she's going to sue the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. Or something also, before I just put this away, of course, there have been, protests in Guinea over President Alpha Conde wanting to add another term for, he's supposed to be retiring this year. His second and last term is supposed to be ending this year, but he's been wanting to add a third term. So there has been a lot of protests going on in Guinea for people who are protesting against presidents, wanting to change the constitution to allow him to go for a third term. So this has really crippled that country, and of course businesses have been shut. Protesters have been very chaotic, and so things are not very good there from Guinea. And this is a story we've been following, and we shall continue to follow. We go to Gambia, where the Gambian government, of course, launched a weeks-old movement demanding a crackdown on the protesters who have been demanding for President Adama Barrow to resign. Remember, President Adama Barrow came to power after elections were held, and Mr. Yahya Jammeh did not want to step down. So ECOWAS, some countries from ECOWAS, had to come in and coerce him together with France. And so Mr. Yahya Jammeh, right now as we speak, lives in Equatorial Guinea, where he went and sought for asylum. He has been hinting that he wants to come back to Gambia, and that he should be allowed to come back to Gambia with no, and nobody should hold him accountable for the things that he did the 22 years he was in power. He was very ruthless. There was a lot of kidnappings. People died. A lot of rapes happened. Others he did, others his soldiers did. And so, so Adama Barrow became the president after him. So the agreement that Mr. Adama Barrow had with, the coalition and the opposition members that he was working with, that they had formed an alliance with, they had agreed that you will come to power. We shall support your candidature. But when you come to power, please just serve 3 years as a president. And then after that, resign. Then thereafter, now we shall go through, have another election, because for what they wanted then was to remove Yahya Jammeh. So they wanted to remove Yahya Jammeh by all means necessary. And then guess what? Adama Barrow became a president, and he said, you know what? This seat is quite warm. The seat of power feels really good. Sleeping at State House. 3 years? Not enough time. After all, the Constitution allows me to sit here for 5 years. So now it's a dilemma. So now those leaders and those coalition partners have come out and they're feeling very betrayed by this move by Adama Barrow, because they had agreed. Remember, he was sworn in Senegal. Remember, Adama Barrow was sworn in Senegal before he came back and to be sworn in again in Gambia after President Yahya Jammeh had refused to step down. So after he left, and then, it's a whole story. So now the agreement was, Adama Barrow, we are going to support you. We are going to galvanize the votes for you. We are going to give you all our support. We'll throw our weight behind you. We just want Yahya Jammeh out. Then after that, you can serve for 3 years, and then after the 3 years you can resign or whatever, and then now we can have elections. And he agreed. I don't know if they signed somewhere, but they agreed. They were in agreement. So 3 years has passed last year, and Mr. Adama Barrow has refused. So now he's been cracking down on the protesters who are asking him to resign, and tension has been building in the Gambia, the tiny West Africa country surrounded by Senegal, over Barrow's decision to stay in office for 5 years after initially pledging to step down after the 3 years. Now, the 3 years Jotna movement, there's a movement called 3 years Jotna, wants the president to make good his promise to serve a reduced term in post-Jammeh transition. And on the other hand, the 5 years Jotagul group says Barrow must serve his full constitutional term. I don't know, should Mr. Adama Barrow, because he's not out of the constitution of the Republic of Gambia, he's within the confines of the constitution. Him being as the president of Gambia, as we speak, has not violated the constitution of Gambia. He is within his rights, as the elected president of the country of Gambia. But now there is the dilemma: is this the constitution that is superior, or is this the gentleman agreement that he had with his coalition partner? What does this say about his own character as a person? What does this say about the mentality our leaders have when they transcend to power? Can you really trust anybody, especially when it comes to politics? Look at what is happening in our country today, which we did talk about too much in the first hour, so I'll not even get into the details of it. Pacts are made every day. Pacts are broken every day. That is the nature of politics, which is not, it's very deceiving, deceitful, or something like that. Nature of politics. So it's very difficult unless you have it on an ironclad or somewhere. I'm sure perhaps they had that, but they were just hoping the same way. They did him a favor by supporting him. He will return the favor and, respect that agreement they had. And so Mr. Adama Barrow has said, no, it is within my constitutional rights. I'm working within the constitution. And here I am, and I'm going to serve a whole full term. So what is at stake here? Is it the constitutional? Should they look at the constitution and what it allows, or should the country consider the agreement that he had with his coalition partners? And that is the dilemma that the Gambians find themselves in today. So there's been a lot of protest from the other coalition partners and their supporters protesting against, Mr. Adama Barrow continued stay in power. So we shall look at Zimbabwe very shortly and then go to South Sudan and end with Biafra. And in Zimbabwe's second city in Bulawayo, there's no water. The taps have run dry. And I was just looking at images from that place. The major dam that supplies that city with water is closed. It has reached the lowest level of the lowest level. So Zimbabwe is going through a lot of problems right now. And this has been a very difficult and bumpy ride for President, Cyril, and not Ramaphosa, that is for South Africa. For President Emmerson Mnangagwa. So right now, Zimbabwe, of course, has been sanctioned so much by the West, and now China is not all of that, helpful to Zimbabwe as we speak. So now Zimbabwe has turned to the United Arab Emirates in its latest bid to find a savior that can help save the economy that is collapsing. And Zimbabwe's government has approached the UAE in hopes of selling a stake in its national oil company. I don't know if it's a good idea, but according to 3 company and government officials familiar with the plan, it also wants companies in the UAE to buy more of its gold, they said. And President Emerson Mnangagwa has said UAE investors will build solar plants in Zimbabwe. And I was watching, I think this is very important, the solar part, because we know Zimbabwe has been going for residents, they have been going for days without power, or they have serious acute power rationing there, and they used to buy some power from South Africa, from ESCOM, which is also having its own problems. It's beyond there in South Africa. So Zimbabwe, that was cut off from Zimbabwe because they're not even able to pay for that. And so Zimbabwe has been having problems after problems. So I don't know if this new partnership with the UAE, if it will bring some reprieve for the government of President Emerson Mnangagwa. But the idea of building solar, I think I've seen it. I've seen some from especially the Arab world. They're very good in that because they usually have a lot of sunshine throughout, and so they harness that, and so things like power blackouts do not happen. Those places, it does not even happen. It does not happen at all. So perhaps Zimbabweans will benefit from this, partnership. So now let's just look at quickly. Dominic Nondo, you're saying is if Africa wants progress, the leaders have to respect the law. Yeah, the leaders have to respect the law. Our leaders, half of the time they think they're above the law, and the other half they just operate in impunity. So there we are. All right. So we look at South Sudan, and the main opposition group SPLM-IO says its leaders will return to Juba. That is, Dr. Riek Machar will be returning to Juba for a final attempt at breaking the deadlock at the number of states. So Mr. Riek Machar will go back to Juba for another circus. Because this is something very, very simple. It's just an agreement. This is something very simple. What is good for the country? What is the best decision that the country can benefit from? All right? So Mr. Riek Machar is set to return to Juba for a final attempt. Remember, the clock is ticking. Today is 27 days to the deadline. That is on 22nd of February. I've been counting. I don't know if my math is good, but yes, it's a few days to go. So he'll be returning. I think he's feeling the heat. He'll be returning. And yesterday, as I was here, remember the other time, over a week and a half ago, I think they met this meeting that was being mediated by Mr. David Mabuza, who is the South African Vice President, together with other African leaders who were part of this mediation team to try to break the deadlock over the state matter that has refused to go away, that has refused to be solved. These leaders have refused, not the state's numbers. These leaders have refused to find a solution for this. And so the decision was, can we just put this on hold and send this for arbitration that will be done by IGAD so that it does not hold the country back from achieving the agreement and the deadline. So they all agreed. And then over the weekend, yesterday I was here, Riek Machar's side has come out and said no. So they pedaled back and they said no. I think we have relooked that and we don't like it. We don't like that the government will be formed, that the peace deal will be signed without these matters of the state being resolved. So we want it resolved fast, and then we can continue with the rest of the process. So that was like they'd made 10 steps ahead. He came back 9 steps all behind. And of course, the government side also has its own has its own issues that he's saying has to be sorted. And so now Riek Machar is saying he'll be returning to Juba to make the last attempt. Why is he calling it a final attempt? Come on now. Are you giving up, Mr. Riek Machar? Think about the country, think about the people for the first time, and just get out of your head for a moment and just see the bigger picture, which is the country and the people of South Sudan. And so, of course, Dr. Riek Machar left Juba for Khartoum on Sunday after spending 2 weeks of fruitless negotiations with President Salva Kiir in Juba. The two principals were expected to agree on whether to maintain, increase, or reduce the current number of states, and the determination of the number of boundaries of states is among the tasks expected to be completed within the pre-transitional period. They were also to confirm their interest to form a government of national unity, considering the reported slow progress in the training and the unification of these forces. In fact, that is the thing. Unification of forces, training of forces. That is the one thing that these leaders should have been spending a lot of their time and resources that is available within them in doing. Because at the end of the day, have the number of states agreed, have everything else agreed. If the army does not come together and be the army of the Republic of South Sudan, not allied to, not working for, not on behalf of, the army and all security organs must come together and be the army of the country, the Republic of South Sudan. Otherwise, if this has not been solved, and this is not even something that it's even, I tell you what, if this is not something that they've taken their time in finding a roadmap, in finding a way to make sure that it is taken care of before the deadline on the 22nd of February, this is something they don't even talk about, and it is very crucial. Because this is what will ensure the country is safe. The insecurity that they are worried about, this is what will ensure that South Sudan is safe. If the army and other forces are brought together and trained to work for the country together and be told, you know what, from now on, you're working together. And they've not taken their time to do this. They don't even talk about it. They're fighting about the number of states. Come on now. So Mr. Machar, I don't know when he'll be coming back to Juba, but he'll be heading to Juba very soon, and to just make attempts to see if he can break the deadlocks over the matters that are still pending there. And of course, the killings that happened, last week in Abyei that left 32 people dead. Is something that the government of South Sudan is asking for the UN to, and the AU to investigate, because these killings happened in an area where the United Nations, forces are situated. So they're wondering, how could this possibly happen? And while we have forces there that are supposed to be protecting our people, so there it is. I'm hoping actually the AU and UN can do something about it. AU, I don't know, but UN perhaps, So anyway, we now look at Biafra as we end, just a few minutes before top of the hour. 10 minutes to go, and Vice President Yemi Osibanjo on Monday lamented the inability of Nigeria to leverage on the engineering and technological ingenuity that emanated from the Republic of Biafra during the Civil War. And he went all over there and said, how Nigeria is missing out on the technology, on the good brains, on the wonderful people, on the ingenuity that, the Biafrans comes with. So he's saying that the government did not harness then. The government does not harness now. Now I understood why. It is very important for the government of Nigeria to not let the people of Biafra go, because they are saying there's a lot of technological ingenuity that comes from that area. There's a lot of good ideas and brains and creativity that comes from that part of the country that they're saying the Nigerian government should now start taking advantage of. Did not take advantage of during the war and even after the Biafra war. Remember, this month there have been celebrations of 50 years after the end of Biafra war. And yesterday, while I was done with the show, and I think a comment came in after I finished, and one of our viewers said that the UK has to take responsibility to its contribution to the Biafra war and how they escalated, and yet they were in a position to do more. And I think I talked about it here a few days ago, and I gave an example about this journalist who was giving his account on how the British government actually was working together with General Yakubu Gowon, because the UK ambassador in Britain, I think when he walked into the room, he loved getting the attention and people, bowing and all of that. So Yakubu Gowon was able to do that, but the leader of Biafra then did not do that. So he did not like Biafrans from there, the Igbos especially from there. He did not like them from there because their leader refused to revere him. But Gowon happened to have done that. And so from then on, he worked with the Nigerian government, and he was complacent. Perhaps they did not contribute the arms or whatever, but the British government silence was complacent and to the killings that happened in Biafra then. So I think we've talked about it. But Vice President is saying, of Nigeria, is saying that now Nigeria needs to take advantage of the wonderful minds and the things that come out of there. So he expressed his regret at a town hall meeting at the National Museum in Umuahia, organized by the Ken Namani Center for Leadership and Development to mark 50th anniversary of the end of Nigerian civil war. And the Vice President noted that there was an attempt to harness the Biafra technology by establishing the Project Development Agency. So Biafra, the government is going to harness the Biafra technology and to benefit everybody else in Nigeria. So the referendum calls. This is something that the government of Nigeria is not even willing to pay attention to. So thank you so much. Thank you for your company. Thank you for making this show a success. This has been Good Morning Africa. My name is Miriam Ogutu, and I'll see you again here tomorrow. Thank you.